Hey everybody, I'm really excited to welcome Cyndi Thomason. We are going to be taking a deep dive into a book that she has launching very soon, January 22nd, Profit First for e-commerce sellers. Cyndi Thomason is the founder and CEO of Bookskeep and is a Profit First practitioner. She's well known within the e-commerce ecosystem, and she is a regular contributor to the InventoryLab newsletter as well as our InventoryLab blog. InventoryLab is, we just love Cyndi. We believe a lot in what she does and just the mission of Bookskeep, and we're really excited to be able to talk with you today about your book. Hi, Cyndi.
Hi, Kim. Thanks so much for having me on and for just the partnership over the last few years. It's been great working with you guys and with your community. I appreciate that.
It's our honor, really. So you have this book launching January 22nd. For anybody that's watching this sometime down the road, we're talking 2019, January 22nd. And I have actually had an opportunity to take a look at the book. And I can tell you first out of the gate that this is not just for InventoryLab users, although we will be referencing that a little bit. And it's not even just for Amazon sellers. This is e-commerce folks across the board that you, and you'll talk a little bit about that being a Profit First practitioner, that you identified just kind of some things along the way that would pertain exclusively to somebody in e-commerce. And so this is really for all e-commerce people. So let's start off with there's two primary principles that you really is at the center of a lot of what you're thinking. So start off with the small plate principle, which I absolutely love, but tell us about those two key components.
Okay, the first one is actually called Parkinson's Law. Mike, in his book, Profit First, which my work is really a derivative from his book, Profit First, that came out first in 2014, and then it was re-released by Penguin House in 2018. And what I have done in my book is try to take the underlying principles that he has developed and apply those to my clients. I've worked with e-commerce sellers for almost 5 years now exclusively. And so I wanted to address the issues they were facing in trying to implement Profit First and the challenges that we had as we worked with our clients. So the underlying principles of Parkinson's Law and the primacy effect that we're going to talk about are recapped in my book, but they're really told from Mike's perspective and the research that he did in developing his book. And the small plates principle really comes from the diet industry, and it's a perfect time of year to be talking about that. Everybody's got their resolutions, but the diet industry says that if we would work off of smaller plates, that our calorie consumption would go down. And there's a number of pieces to that. If you eat your vegetables before you eat your sweets, you'll eat less sweets. So there's a rhythm and a sequencing that's important. So Profit First really works with the idea of Parkinson's Law to help us understand our behavior around money. And what Parkinson's Law states is that, first of all, let me just say it's an economic law. It was developed in the 1950s by Cyril Northcote Parkinson. He was a British naval officer, and he studied how the British Navy, how their bureaucracies changed and grew and how they used their resources. And he came up with this theory of induced demand, and that's your economics lessons for today. And induced demand really basically says we use what we got. So if you've got a plate full of food, you're likely to eat it all. If your plate is smaller and there's less food on it, again, you're likely to eat it all. And the sense of satisfaction from eating your plate of food is the same satisfaction. The example that we like to use, because I think everybody can relate to it, is toothpaste. And if you have a brand new tube of toothpaste and you're going to use that in the morning, you don't really think about it. You just squeeze out a nice long bead of toothpaste. If you're down to the very last little bit in your, and I'm going to have to go to the store in a few days, you get really conscious of using just a little bit. right? And that is the Parkinson's law of induced demand, where you use what you got. And the nice thing about understanding this is that it's a factor in all of our behavior. And if we can set up our finances in a way that works with that behavior, whether it's toothpaste or money in our bank account or time, whatever the resource is, if we can understand that behavior around ourselves, then we can better manage our finances so that we work with that behavior. And where small plates come into play from the financial perspective is we equate the small plates to bank accounts. And those bank accounts are set up to have specific purposes. So for example, if you have, like most of my clients, when we start working together, you have one bank account that's for all of your activity, your operating expenses, paying for your inventory, paying for your payroll, paying your sales tax when they come due. All of that stuff is put into one account. Then you look at that account every day. I guarantee you most of my clients will go sit down at their desk and they log on to their bank account, and that's their data point. And their data is either I got a lot of money or I got to hustle. I've got a big payment coming up and I don't have any money. And it's really hard to look at that one bank account and understand where you stand financially. As much as I like to say that we've got books that are up to date and you could go look at your QuickBooks or your Xero and understand where you are financially, the reality is even I don't do that. I look at my bank account. My books are always a few days behind, and by having everything in one bucket, I don't really get good data. So what Parkinson's law and the way we employ it in Profit First for e-commerce sellers, what it allows us to do is segregate our money into different buckets for different purposes. Kind of like the old envelope system that your grandmother may have had, where she had something for an envelope for rent and an envelope for groceries and an envelope for her utilities. We do that same thing with our business bank accounts. And it allows you to look and see, okay, I've set aside this money for inventory, and I know I've got a bill coming up. I may not get it for another 60 days, but I'm going to have to pay it, and I've got the money set aside there to pay it. And so that's what Parkinson's law allows us to do, is just to really segregate and understand our habits around money and segregate the way we keep track of our money, so that when you log on to your bank account, you're getting you've got a dashboard, you've got some real data you can make decisions from.
And I just love the way that you explain it. The way that you're able to break that down is so meaningful. And I like your choice of words, working with this, because it's almost like instead of working against that way of thinking, you're using that way of thinking to work with, to support, the growth and moving forward. And, kind of goes back to, you and I talked recently about, we did a webinar together about InventoryLab and whether or not they should be integrated with, people using Xero and QuickBooks, and how the two can work together. Really had a great time with that, but we talked a lot about fear, and that you really have such a great technique of helping people anticipate what's coming around a corner. And I'm always looking for ways to pump the fear out of the room, just a little bit more, pump the anxiety out of the room, because especially for people without that background in business and in e-commerce, there are a lot of unknowns, and of course there are going to be. And when you have that small plates, I remember Dave Ramsey talking about using the envelope, going back to that system. And I remember him talking about when you take the cash out of the envelope for the groceries, then you factually know that you're not accidentally spending the money that you need to keep the lights on. And, it's kind of like the same thing. And I mean, the money part of it, there's a lot of value there. But for me, the value was in the elimination of the anxiety and fear around money, that I knew where everything was, and that I was in front of it, and it wasn't in front of me. It wasn't, it wasn't controlling me, I was controlling it, kind of a thing. And and applying that theory for e-commerce businesses, I think is just fantastic.
Any business needs the visibility of where their cash is going. And I talk to people all the time that may tell me, I really don't know how much I spend on marketing, and I really don't know how much I spend on payroll. I can guarantee you people that are doing profit first know, because every time they get a settlement from Amazon, or we go through the 10th and 25th cycle that we recommend, which is handling your cash flow twice a month, not every day, but by handling it twice a month, you learn your patterns. And so people that are going through that process, and every other week are sitting down and saying, okay, I'm putting this percentage towards my inventory, I'm putting this percentage of my income towards my payroll, they can tell you, 40% goes to payroll, 35% to inventory, and that's their numbers. They know them because they work with them, and they know that when those accounts get out of sync, that something's changing in their business, and it gives them enough bandwidth and enough time to react to that. And once you realize you've got that bandwidth, then that's when the fear can leave you, because you can, business is going to happen. I mean, there's ups, downs. That's what it's all about, right? And so just giving yourself enough runway to react to it is what gives you that sense of peacefulness, freedom, understanding that you've got time to work out whatever the challenges come up to be.
Yeah, and you and I have talked before about knowing your numbers, and of course, anybody watching this, they've probably heard that, a half a dozen times already. But again, without that background in business, knowing your numbers, sometimes, especially, it was definitely true for myself. What numbers? What am I supposed to be accounting for? And when I had no idea. So there was a lot of fear around what I was doing. But before InventoryLab, my background was in the nonprofit sector, and e-commerce played an important role in keeping the lights on and generating that additional income that was needed. So it wasn't something that I was just doing flippantly. I was very serious about it, but I didn't have the knowledge around. I just knew money was going out and money was coming in, but I had no idea really.
The patterns.
Yeah, but I had, without that knowledge, it wasn't until I got on the other side of it that I could look back and say, I dealt with a lot of discouraging moments where I felt like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is what, I'm so discouraged. I'm so frustrated all the time. I'm so tired. But a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. And it wasn't until I got on the other side that I thought, it is when you know those numbers, when you know what numbers you're supposed to be accounting for and then when you do know them, you come at running your business in a very different way. And I have really, especially being in my role with InventoryLab, I'm really able to see that that's a differentiating factor between an entrepreneur and somebody that desires to be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. That even if that number isn't what you want it to be yet, it's that knowing of the number that they just take on a very different persona. They self-identify as an entrepreneur at that point. So I know, and again, in my role, I know a lot of folks that can be very intimidating, kind of sitting down and really getting a handle on numbers. I kind of, when I think about it, it might be like putting together a personal budget, which for a lot of people can be scary. And like, as probably everybody's already guessed, I attach a lot of fear, to money. It's just, I grew up like that, and I guess it just kind of stuck with me. So doing a budget, I would rather get a root canal every day of the week for a month before I want to sit down and do that. But at the expense of my well-being, my emotional well-being, and feeling at peace and empowered with my business. So in your role at Bookskeep, is that something that's common? Do you have folks that are kind of coming in, maybe even that feel like they do know their numbers, and you kind of find out that they don't, or folks that have come in and said, here's my shoebox filled with information, help me figure this out, I'm ready to take that step? Is that, so despite its importance, is that something that you see pretty often?
It is, and it's interesting because even people that think they know their numbers aren't always evaluating the important pieces of the puzzle, and as we talked the other day in the other webinar that we did, they may be relying on information that they've put in a system that they've not updated and kept up to date. And for that reason, they're relying on information thinking they know their numbers. And when we actually do the financial piece, we can see where the processes that they've had in place for relying on numbers really weren't giving them reliable numbers. And so I think it is a situation where people have whatever their money history is, that they have either a fear around it or a feeling of incompetence, and so that they don't even proclaim to want to know because they just don't feel capable of it. But it is the language of business, and it really is important for you, for any entrepreneur, to understand what that language is telling them so that they're getting good information to be able to adjust and react to what's going on in their business. If they're looking at data that is flawed, then they're going to be making decisions that may lead them to a result that they're not wanting to make. So taking the initiative and realizing the importance of facing the fear of the numbers and taking the time to learn what they're representing really is the biggest thing that can help folks know how to move forward in their business.
It's an interesting thought that what we have grown up with or our established thinking of money and how that might influence how we run our businesses. And I talked with a woman named Monica. She runs eCommerce Kids, a group that I'm a huge fan of. And I really just kind of felt like she was changing the world. When I saw her speak at a conference, I thought, oh my word. And I immediately remembered when I was a kid, probably about 11, there was a statistic that said pretty much that entrepreneurs come from entrepreneurial families. And I immediately checked that off the list as options for my life, because I did not have, I didn't have an entrepreneur role model in my family or even in my immediate circle. So I thought, okay, well, that's not in the cards for me. But then I found myself in this career that I loved, that didn't pay really well. I really struggled self-identifying as an entrepreneur, and so I think I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit more. Just kind of talking to people, can they look back and see how what they thought of money and those established ideas around money, how that changes how they run their business. I do want to go back to the small plate theory a little bit, and kind of, so you also in the book talk a lot about, you see like the common term cash flow, and there's actually a chapter called Inventory Insanity, and prioritizing profit, which a lot of folks, those are two words you don't often see together, prioritizing profit. But I do want to start with cash flow, because that is a common term within running a business, an important, something that people should probably be familiar with. But for anybody that isn't, can you tell us kind of just a basic definition of what is cash flow? What does that mean?
Well, it's quite simply the money that comes into your business and then the money that flows out of your business, and the rhythm that is created by those two transactions. And of course, what we want is more coming in than going out. And but that's not always, and I probably would say it's not even typically the case with a lot of people that we start to work with. But it really is just the flow of money coming in and going out of the organization. So it's not some big complicated accounting technique. There are cash flow reports that you can use, but if you just take it down to its most basic level of you have money coming in and you have money going out, and for really to be profitable, you really want to be sure you're living within those funds coming in. And it's kind of a pet peeve of mine that people say you just need to throw more money at the problem. You just need to buy more inventory and that will solve your cash flow issues. Because in reality, it's just the opposite. If you do not have a business model that is going to support buying more inventory and selling it at a price where you're going to get a return, you're going to continually be stuck with cash flow issues and borrowing money to buy more inventory, to generate more sales that aren't contributing to your bottom line, doesn't get you out of that problem. In fact, borrowing money creates another expense you have to pay for, and that's the interest expense. So you may have this infusion of cash coming into your business that you have to then pay back the principal, and you have to pay back the interest. So there are times when borrowing money is useful, but until your business is really set up and proven out with its business model, and you know your numbers, you are really potentially throwing gas on a fire. And I really recommend, if anyone's considering taking out a loan so that they can buy more inventory and they are not in a position of really understanding their profitability and that their business model is working, hold up, take a few minutes, get things figured out before you put yourself in debt and you risk money going into a business model that you may not be able to sustain long term.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Leave that to the seasoned folks, the ones that are self-identifying as an entrepreneur. They know their numbers like the back of their hand. There's an ease to it. They have that flow. Then, okay, when you have some spare time, then you can look at doing something like that. I read an article recently. I wish I could remember what it was, but the author was talking about, addressing an issue and the solution. And he said, if you have a leak in the roof, you don't go buy more buckets. And essentially it's kind of the same thing. So the answer to the, if you have a cash flow problem is not to get more buckets and buy more inventory. There's other approaches, but sometimes they might not even know that other options even exist.
Right.
There's so much out there, like social media, and maybe they have somebody that they're connected to, kind of introduce them to the idea of e-commerce, so they kind of see what's working for their business and feel like, well, those numbers apply to mine also, and if I mimic that. And of course, that's not the case. Would you agree?
Right. Everybody's business is different. We have clients that are in the same vertical niche in e-commerce that are selling very similar products. Their approaches to their business are very, very different, and their methodologies for when they borrow cash or when they how they ramp up and introduce new products, they're very different. And even though they're probably selling to some of the same customers, that's what's fun, that's what allows us to put our mark and our brand on our products and our service, is that we can do it our way. And so I won't say there's necessarily one right way, but relying on debt, I can tell you, is a way that is you need to be prepared for, and you need to be sure that you understand your profitability to be able to support debt. And there's nothing wrong with doing it different from somebody else that you may be connected with. They don't know your business, so people it's hard for people to give advice on social media. I think it's fine to say this is how I did it, but there's a whole lot of experience behind how you did it that can't be addressed in a little post on Facebook. And so take time and just get yourself educated before you think that somebody else's methodology is necessarily the answer for your approach, to your problems or your approach.
Absolutely. So Profit First for e-commerce sellers, it's literally 160 pages of actionable tools, templates, click-by-click instructions. So it's not like what we were just talking about. It's not just for one business model. Everybody, seasoned Amazon sellers, seasoned e-commerce business owners, brand new folks, they're going to find something actionable throughout. I mean, really just like click-by-click, step-by-step templates, tables where they plug in these numbers here and there. And there is a part of the book I just really, really loved, because I have such a heart for new folks that are coming in, and I want so much for them to hit that tipping point where they, where we know that they're going to succeed. But you give them very realistic goals. And you mentioned Robin Johnson from Best from the Nest. You mentioned her in the book, and I know the two of you are really great friends and work together in a lot of different projects. But you use her example of when you're brand new, that the expectation should be, you're sourcing inventory, your goal should be 40% ROI. So return on investment percentage, for anybody that isn't familiar with that term, 40% ROI. And then as you grow, as you learn more, you're going to raise the bar. Now it's 50% ROI percentage and 60% ROI percentage. And kind of going step by step through that scaffolded, kind of journey, I just really, really appreciated. But I also love that that you point out, and I know that Robin points out also, kind of going back to like that social media and comparing yourself to other business models, it's made very, very clear you should expect and anticipate that sourcing is going to take you a little bit longer, because you're going to do it the right way. You're going to go about it the responsible way. You're going to source without regrets. You're going to make mistakes here and there. It's going to happen. But setting these goals, expect that it's going to take you a little bit longer. And there's such a great focus on that. And it's that proactive approach, the responsible approach, the entrepreneurial approach to sourcing inventory, eliminating that ambiguity, pumping the fear out of the room when it comes to that. And you even touch on some of the tools that are available. Of course, the Amazon seller app is free if you're selling on Amazon, especially, if you're doing like FBA or even merchant fulfilled. That information, you're able to see that as you're sourcing. You're able to see what the profit would be, and you can plug in your buy cost can get plugged in the seller app. And of course, if you're subscribing to InventoryLab, you have access to Scoutify, and you're in Scoutify, you're able to actually set your desired ROI in the app. So if you're brand new and your goal is 40%, you plug in 40, and as you're out, sourcing inventory, as you're scanning or however you're researching, it's going to pop up, that desired ROI. It's going to let you know if it hits that target. It's going to tell you actually even your target cost per unit. So letting you know that you need to be able to purchase this for this amount, cost per unit or less. And if you don't, you're not going to hit that ROI percentage. And then, to kind of like keep it moving. So Scoutify even has more tools, but if you're just starting out, if you're brand new, the Amazon seller app is there. It takes longer. It doesn't have a lot of that information like really put up front that kind of follows along with, how the book kind of guides you through like what's important to look at. That's all like really up front on Scoutify, but the Amazon seller app is there as well. But just all of it, just that proactive approach is just kind of seen throughout the book.
Well, one thing that, the sourcing piece of it is really important. And of course, that's where all of it starts with, cash going out the door. But what I see with a lot of my clients is that they don't pay attention to what happens after they've made that purchase. And that they have repricers connected to their listings, and what looked like a really great sourcing decision at the time that they made it, over time, the inventory landscape has changed. The repricer's gone in there and done some work. And what looked like a great, 50% ROI, when the actual sale takes place and you look at what you got for the product, sometimes it's not meeting that. And so that's one of the cautions that I would have for people is those systems where you are making those decisions on, realize that that's not necessarily how it's going to play out over time. And what I see with a lot of my clients is they think, okay, I'm sourcing at 50 or 60%. So that's got to be what my ROI is. But whenever we actually do their books, we come in with a much lower number, and it's never fun to have to say, sorry, but your gross margin, your gross profit is not really at a sustainable level for your business. And what I've come to understand over time, working through those differences in my clients' expectations with what we present as verified books that have been reconciled back to statements. What drives that difference is over time, what you thought was going to happen at the time you sourced did not play out. And a repricer may have changed things. You may have had to manually go in and change the price of a product to get it to move.
Long-term storage fees have been a huge impact. We actually even added in InventoryLab, Scout is our web-based research tool inside of InventoryLab on the web, and we built in a storage fee calculator. So as you're researching products, you can see the decline of profitability over time, because it has become such a big factor. And it seems like Amazon is changing those fees like all the time. Recently made a change again, but kind of towards a benefit for sellers. Thankfully, doesn't happen often, but when it does, we kind of celebrate. And but there are so many different things that can impact, and things that people don't think amount to much. Like in Scoutify, you're also able to plug in your sales tax percentage. So if you're paying sales tax, you're able to plug in your estimated shipping. So how much is going to cost to ship this product FBA? What it's going to add to that FBA shipment, bringing all of those things together. But even then, I always say, this will give you a ballpark idea of what you can anticipate the net profit to be. Mm-hmm. Because repricers and long-term storage fees, all of those things, after the cash flow comes in, and when it's all said and done after the sale, it might look different, and it might look very different when all the pieces are brought together.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is our experience, is that it does look different, and it's not a good surprise usually. It's usually, I hate to tell you this, but you're not as well off as you thought you were, and let's figure out what's going on in the way you're managing your business, that you've had your expectation of one thing, but your performance is actually something different. Let's get those two things in alignment, because just like we look at our bank account for profit first and make, that's our dashboard. If people are looking at, Seller Central or InventoryLab, and they're making decisions off of data that's not been maintained and that's not really in sync with their financial system, they're making decisions on bad data. So let's get those things in sync, so you're making decisions on good data and can have a better outcome.
And when we were talking before, you used the term set it and forget it, that set it and forget it mentality, and how dangerous that can be. The small plates principle, having those things in place, kind of makes that a lot easier to do, to account for that, account for everything over time, not, just setting it and forgetting it and sticking your head in the sand, but keeping a hold on that. When you're applying the small plates principle, it's just so much easier to actually accomplish that. And throughout the book, like what you were saying, you encourage folks not to just look at profitability before, but addressing and really evaluating profitability after the sale as well, to get an idea of what's working for your business, what isn't working for your business, and making those informed decisions. Yeah.
Clients a lot of times will tell me, this is my best seller, this is my biggest performer, and but they're losing a lot of money, and I'm like, well, what's your profitability on that performer? And we start digging into it, and yes, it's popular, but they'd be better off if they never sold another one. Selling something that you make no money on, that ties up a lot of your cash, is a recipe for a cash flow problem. So really understanding what your profitability is by product, and the ability to understand the volume and the need for cash to keep that product in stock. Those kinds of decisions will set up, when you make those decisions in conjunction with an account for inventory, for example. Mm-hmm. If you have a percentage of everything that you sell go directly into inventory, so that you can buy inventory and replenish again, and you're running out of money all the time, that's a pretty good sign that you're not recouping the cost of your product when you're selling it. That's a red flag. That's a wake-up call. You got to pay attention.
Yeah, I think maybe we're seeing the same people. Like, one of my favorite things to do at conferences is to sit down with somebody and do a one-on-one consultation. You're like, tell me about your business. Now let's look at your InventoryLab account. Let's look at it together, and let's see what you can get more value out of. what tools aren't you utilizing that you could be, and why? And so with InventoryLab, you're able to view profitability by ASIN, by MSKU, by category, by supplier. So you're really able to kind of bring those pieces together. But I'm telling you, it's very rarely do I say to somebody, what category do you think is your most profitable, or supplier, or MSKU? They feel very strongly, they're very confident, like, oh, I know this one is going to be, this is my number one. And then when we look at the numbers, it's, again, exactly what you said. Sure, it's a popular one. It's usually the one that they've sold the most quantities of, most recently, but it's going to be something else. And you do talk about inventory, but I don't want anybody to think that this is about inventory management. This is like way beyond inventory management guidance. I mean, that is a piece, but this isn't just about, like the humdrum kind of inventory management. Just like the rest of everything we've been talking about, you're providing tools that will help people see around corners, and you're using real, actual examples of clients that you've had through Bookskeep. And one that I really, really liked was Carol, was an example that you used in the book, that, that one of the things that happens is Amazon loses inventory. But Carol's solution to that, I thought, was really interesting. And I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that before. Can you talk a little bit about Carol and that experience and coming up with that?
Sure. Carol, luckily we had been doing Profit First with Carol for a while, and she had an inventory account, and she was banking money in that account to be able to launch some new products. And she had just bought I think it was like a $12,000 shipment of her product and sent it into Amazon. And it was a number of different products. Carol's story is in the book, and she's just awesome for sharing her stories, and her good stories and her bad stories. So, I think it's really wonderful when somebody's willing to give, all of their information to be able to help somebody else. So kudos to Carol. But Carol had bought like a $12,000 shipment and sent it into Amazon, and Amazon lost her shipment. Luckily, she been saving money for a whole new inventory, a launch of a new product. So she had money for a whole new inventory buy, and immediately bought a new order because it was a busy time for her and she needed to have the order there. She bought it. Do you know that they lost the second order too? Carol, bless her heart, as all of that had transpired, and it was favorable that she had gotten inventory in and they were shipping her product again. Still hadn't found the second batch of inventory. That was still lost. Then her account got suspended. It was suspended for 11 days. Oh. So she had to, not only had she got all her money tied up in inventory, she had 11 days where she didn't sell anything. And she had to get resources and people involved to help get reinstated. So she learned some things from that experience. One of them is to ship smaller quantities. Don't ship all $12,000 worth of your stuff in at one time. And she ships by product, so that she's not sending 15 or 20 of different things. She sends so much of product A and so much of product B individually, so that those things go in. And her experience has been she doesn't have things get lost in that situation. So I think Carol had some really great actionable tips for people.
Yeah.
And smaller gave her the bandwidth to react, but she got smart how to do business differently too.
And throughout all of that, though, with the suspension and the money that you have to kind of invest to be able to get reinstated, and the loss of the inventory, and for her to share that and be transparent about that is so helpful to so many other people. But when I got to avoid that going forward, smaller shipments that contain single SKUs.
Right.
And so that's one of those things that gives her that runway, if something does go wrong. And I just thought, oh my gosh, why had I not thought about that before? I love that. But throughout the book, you share client stories, and obviously folks that have given you permission to do so. But there's just so much to learn from what from mistakes that they had made, successes they had. There's just so much information, and I love your transparency in the book. You're so transparent. You even have a whole section on where, the pitfalls of profit first, where people have gone wrong in the past when they, start to apply these methodologies to their business. You say, this is where things have gone wrong in the past, and this is how to avoid those. And I thought, yep, that's Cyndi. I loved it.
And we really want people to be successful. I mean, I can tell you it's changed my life, just in the way I manage my business, and the ability to do some really great things with my team and for my team. Having that profit account allows us to really reward our team and to do some nice things in the community. So it's really awesome. But I learned from doing it wrong too. It makes it work with our behavior instead of against it, like we were talking about Parkinson's law. I'm going to log into my bank account and I'm going to decide whether there's a lot of money there and I want to do something fun, or there's a little there and I need to be hustling. So why not have that data be more meaningful? Yeah.
It has been such a pleasure talking with you. So January 22nd, Profit First for e-commerce sellers. I'm so excited.
I got it here. I got my one copy, so yay.
Oh, there it is. That's a good looking book right there. And you even have it coming in hard copy, correct?
It will be for March. I've got a number of speaking things going on in March, and so the hard copies are on order, but I don't have them yet. Right now it's available on Kindle and Amazon for pre-order, Kindle and paperback for pre-order. I found out a day or two ago that the Audible version has been approved, and so it's in their process of being listed now. So the audiobook should be out by the 22nd also.
Wow. Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you if they, just like to know more, or even know more about Bookskeep, becoming a client of Bookskeep? How can they get in touch with you?
Bookskeep.com. That's BOOKSKEEP.com. A lot of information on our website. I do a lot of blogging, and so there's a lot of you can get a lot of questions answered on the blogs there. If you'd like to email me, it's Cyndi, CYNDI @bookskeep.com. There's also a contact us form on the website, so if you can't remember my name, you can just do the contact us form. It'll come to me.
And so right after January 22nd or soon thereafter, you're also going to be launching kind of like a Facebook book club for Profit First for e-commerce sellers, correct?
Yeah, it's something new we're going to try. Of course, Bookskeep has a page, and all our blog posts are listed there as they're available. But we've got a lot of resources that are in the book that people can log on to our website. And in the website, they'll be able to download the templates that we use for doing profit assessments, for making good product decisions, just a ton of really great Excel templates as well as articles. And so as people are making use of those, I have a feeling there's going to be people that have questions and that get stuck. And so there'll be a Facebook page where they can go, and on that Facebook page they can pose questions. We'll try to give them an answer and point them in the right direction, and hope that other people that are working through it can also help out with that if they've already done it. And understanding what questions people have will help me to understand where they're getting stuck and how I can improve and write more in our blogs about those topics, so that hopefully we make it a little more seamless for people as they try to implement Profit First going forward.
Well, I'll be in that Facebook group for sure. I'm just really excited about the entire launch in general. Thank you so much for allowing us to talk about the book and just really kind of bring some of this information together for folks and letting them know that it's coming out. It has been such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. It's been fun. Thank you so much for all your support. I really appreciate it.